Hi guys, this is Russ with HealthForward Online, and tonight I'm going to be videoing a lecture on the topic of genetic engineering. And the speaker tonight is going to be Harald. And could you just tell us briefly the topics that you're going to be talking about and what we can expect?
Yes. So I'm going to talk about the effects of genetic engineering onto the farm and its products. Okay. I'm going to look at what it means that we use these products, genetic engineered, that we use actually Roundup Ready crop primarily, and BT, genetically engineered BT that is inserted into the plants, and what it means for the health of the soil, of the plants, of the animals, and of our own, and how devastating actually the effect is going to be for decades of time. And the sooner we can stop this, the better, because we have to live with the consequences. And the consequences means actually greater diseases, greater instances of diseases. The land will be polluted, and it will be very hard to know what has to be used to make crops grow properly. Certain elements will not work. This is a main concern, just to see how to, look at this disaster and ask the question, how did we get there? How could we have gotten to such a point that we have lost all our senses to do something that's totally counterintuitive?
Yeah, and profits probably come into this, obviously, as to the motive of why this is being done for corporations.
Yes, of course, And you wonder when could we expect that it will come to to the tipping point that we realize we have to stop. And I'm thinking very much of Silent Spring. How long did that take until we understood what DDT was doing and how much denial was there, how long? And think of the advertisement, kids running after the spraying tanks and just enjoying it, and it was all fine.
Yeah.
How long did it take, and what effect did we have that we're still dealing with after decades? How is it with particularly with birds? We lost some birds, the eagle is just about gone from many places because they were in polluted areas. So there's huge problems, and probably much bigger than with the last one.
Okay, well, thank you for your time. We'll look forward to your lecture.
Yeah. So, good evening. I'm very happy to be here and talk about genetic engineering from my particular perspective. I will not talk about the seed aspects that you asked for that come at the end, but there will be plenty of time. So I am farming at Rudolf Steiner College, and I work biodynamically. I've been there for 25 years. And I teach also at Rudolf Steiner College classes on this method of farming that's biodynamic. Was actually the first organic movement started in 1924, initiated by Rudolf Steiner. On farmers asking the question what to do with the problems they had about 90 years ago. There's still some people who haven't asked yet. Can we do something? We have lots of problems. We're not looking enough at, what could be done. And
a little bit loud.
Okay.
That gives too much feedback.
Good.
Maybe you could project a little
Good,
more.
I'll just project more. And the question first is, how should a farm be organized? What should be on a farm to make it healthy? What happened in the last 100 years is that actually farming became ever more fragmented. There used to be a time when all farms were really organisms, where all the different parts were working together, where the fertility was either generated on the farm, or there was so much in the soil, say of the prairies, there was so much residual fertility from millennia that the farmers could just use and use and use, and it wouldn't wear off. By now, most of it is gone. But there was a time when farming was a lot easier and people had an understanding we have to take all the parts together. We can't take just an individual part. And this started changing, early on here already in California, because there was the market. As soon as the railroad was there was a market back east. And you could put things on the railroad and ship it to the cities. And so agriculture here, especially here, was very early on specialized. Say, fruit crops, all different kind of crops, but not so much the farm as an organism. What does this mean to have the farm as an organism? Ideally, you would have all the parts that are needed produced on the farm. This is how farming used to be. 200 years ago, where the farmer would, of course, have some livestock. You would have livestock, they produce manure, the manure is composted, this is then used for fertilizing the crops that you're growing. And ideally, probably also people would grow some of their seeds. Well, you couldn't buy seeds over. You had to grow your own. And so where are we today? We give everything to somebody else. So how is farming done today? For the most part, it's really industrial, that all the raw materials are brought from somewhere else. They're not from the farm, but they come from elsewhere. So you buy your fertilizer, first of all. Then you buy your seeds. Then you buy, if you have it, maybe livestock. It's normally not on the same farm any longer. It's a different farm. Then you buy your livestock. You buy maybe your young calves or whatever, or your little chicks. And then you raise them and you buy the feed. And then basically the farm only is a place where all this is put together, and then later you send it out again and you buy your new raw products again and you do the production again. What does this mean? It means that you cannot really generate true health. Because how is it with health, or how is it when things are working together? There is conversation. How is it when you have a partner? Hopefully you're talking enough with one another. You kind of know where you are because you always are in conversation. You know each other well, and because you know each other well, you can support each other, and you know roughly how things are going. But in a place where you constantly put things together that have no relationship, actually it's very inefficient, extremely inefficient. So instead of creating, maybe having seed that have a relationship to your particular soil, to your particular way of fertility what you're normally using, you're putting something in that comes from who knows where. I'm just talking even conventional farming, not even genetic engineering, just to get started. We're totally disconnected. The method that I use, that I'm working with, biodynamic agriculture, looks at this first thing. Is, are we working within an organism? Can they start to work more and more together? Can the animals be more and more well suited for their particular place? Can the seeds work best where I am? And is the feed that they're getting, does it come from there? Are there any relationships? So that when I get the manure from the animals, does it really belong there even? So those are very big questions. And we just don't look at this at all any longer. And if we were, we would be already a lot further. You may ask, how come these farmers who are using genetically engineered products that are say the livestock people who use soy, who use corn that is genetically engineered, and now alfalfa, how come they didn't stop a long time ago using this stuff, or say a decade ago, considering all the health effects? You know why? Most of them don't grow their own feed. So they buy this, so the farms are so specialized, so they buy the feed, so they don't know what's in there. And the farms where they do grow feed, they figured it out. You'll see this in this film that some farmers, farmers are interviewed. They say, well, we've noticed. So those who used the genetic engineered crops, so we saw it, and then we stopped it. We used other feed, and the animals got more healthy again. So this is one fundamental thing. The farms have gotten disconnected. There's no understanding really how things work together, and so there's no quick answer. The answers would have been there had farmers more working in farms that are truly an organism. That's the very first thing. When we have to really see this, that's where a lot of the problems come from. Now, I have this as my background, and one particular aspect that we work with in biodynamics is to foster, you could say maybe to try to stimulate life activity on the farm. What is it? What do we cherish when we eat food? It's actually the life that's in it. It's not just sort of, nutritional facts. Well, okay. But it's not it. It's really, does the food have the vitality that we need? The proper vitality. Not just something that's actually too rich and it will make us sick because it has almost too much life, but not the right kind. But rather, does it have the proper vitality that we need? So, we want this in our food. But at the same time, this means, as a farmer, I'm harvesting these crops that go out into the market that people eat. They get the vitality, hopefully, that they need. What am I dealing with later? I've sent this vitality off the farm. Is it clear? And there's not the same amount there any longer. So the stimulating of proper vitality that is actually enhancing life is a key. So if I make compost, which has transformed that what was at some point good, but then has sort of become, a waste, and if I can bring that in the proper form back onto the land, I stimulate the growth of plants very strongly. And of course, we don't always have enough compost. So we have particular ways in my form of agriculture and biodynamics where we try to stimulate this level of life even on a finer level, where we use fermented herbs in the compost that will stimulate the availability of micronutrients. This is a key. These micronutrients are very important actually in allowing, for instance, the availability of, or that help in free-living nitrogen-fixing bacteria in the soil. Vanadium and molybdenum, two trace elements that are a very small amount in the ground. They get stimulated through stinging nettle that's fermented in a particular way. We use this in biodynamic agriculture. So we constantly look at how can we bring more vitality and make sure that these micronutrients are there in the proper amount. So for me, this is a natural, and this is what I'm always looking for. How can I make sure that the compost has the proper vitality, that I've added this to it so that there's more life. That's how things should be. And people used to do it in nature. You don't need to worry about it because sort of the tree that falls down in the natural forest, if it's so, is the foundation for new growth. But in agriculture, we're constantly taking away, and we have to replenish the vitality that goes out. That as a background first. Yeah? Okay. So now, 20 years ago, we started hearing about genetic engineering. We understand more and more how things are put together, how nature is put together. And then finally, now we can make it up the way how we like it and make it so much easier. Most important, we can save the world because there's not enough food in the world. You've heard this. And through genetic engineering, finally there will be enough food for everyone to eat. And it will be so much easier for the farmer because instead of making extra runs with a tractor and putting application of, say, fertilizer or more important, herbicides onto the land, you could put it into the crop, and so there will be less because the crop, the crop itself should have the poison in it, like this Bacillus thuringiensis that will kill the corn worm, that will bore into the corn. You've seen corn that you buy, organic corn that you buy, and the top is cut off. Have you ever seen this? Mm-hmm. Well, because of this corn worm. So now if we make this whole thing poisonous to the corn worm, then you don't need to do this any longer. It's just you got it all taken care of. So make it easy for the farmers. They're working so hard. And give them a technology through which they can just do less of this harmful stuff onto the land. Because these chemicals are harmful for the land and we want to do less of it. So that was the big promise. The promise was through genetic engineering there will be less application of pesticides and of chemicals onto the land. It will be more benign, and this will be a great way of saving the world, feeding the world. That's what we heard. And many of us said, cool, great, yes, or, well, maybe not. What did we think back then? What did we think? I was thinking, wait a moment, this is not how the world is put together. that you put a gene from a totally unrelated organism into another one. This is not how the world is working. So first of all, at least my natural response was, we're violating nature. This is a rape of nature, of sorts. And this cannot be right. This cannot be good. It will catch us. But first of all, the fear was, okay, once these organisms get loose in nature, we'll have spreading of monster plants that will be uncontrollable. It has not gone that far, even though with BT corn it certainly has been an effect, but it has not happened quite as much. But I must say, I wonder where people were 20 years ago when this first came on, and where, most of all, I must say, where were the people of belief, of, say, religious belief, where you think about the sanctity of life, and that life has been created really in the image of higher divine plan. How come nobody spoke up? I still don't get it. Were people thinking, well, maybe it will make things so much easier, and we need more food? Everyone jumped onto this. We need more food, and this way we can get it. So, this is very strange. Really, it's very strange that nothing happened. It should have happened right away. Of course, very, very much in the beginning, the industry was proud of the creation. Do you remember in '95 the Flavor Saver tomato? When it came onto the market, you could go to the supermarket and you would get a little extra flyer, proudly announced, here it is, our first genetically engineered crop that you can buy. Go for it. Well, it turned out it was not really to go for. It was not really working. It was a tomato that was supposed to not get soft in the store, but it have retarded, actually softening, so that you could buy it and basically it would be more like a tennis ball rather than, a precious fruit that has its natural aging. So that was '95. What happened? People didn't pay too much attention. There was too little of it. At the same time, for me as a farmer, I was very much worried. What would happen if people would think, hey, it's just too difficult to deal with problems. Genetic engineering can take care of it for us. If it's done, then they'll do it, and we just use those seeds. I think many people were thinking this, and there was not enough response. I thought at the same time, what is going to be with our seeds? I had been already a seed saver. I had grown seeds already for at least 5 years or more, and I knew I needed good seeds to grow. I needed to have good seeds that could be reproduced. Just a little bit on the side, when hybrids were first introduced, seeds that were put in together from two different parents, when you grow seeds of those, you don't know what comes out. You get actually some messy stuff. All kind of things will come up with the next generation. So it's not worthwhile to save seeds from hybrid. I saw this already, the proliferation of hybrids, and how there was less and less seeds available that one could grow for seed later to make the farmer actually, or the gardener, independent and not a junkie. Because that's what was going to happen. Even with the hybrids, we were all becoming junkies. Give me more. I need another one. I need another one. I can't live without you. Farming should be that you are sovereign on your land. That whatever you need is produced on your land. That you can do it from within your organism, instead of having to go out for getting the inputs from elsewhere. So that's where things have gotten already with the seeds before genetic engineering. So I saw the great danger and thought, how is it going to work? And I had grown already seeds in a good amount. And this is so interesting. In 1995, that very year, there were 3 biodynamic seed companies that suddenly were there. People, it was almost as if we smelled it, we had known it. I don't know if people knew that the Flavor Saver was going to come out, but that same year, there were 3, albeit small, seed companies springing up. So people said, yes, we'll grow our own. We'll create an alternative seed supply because we need that for the future. We can't rely on just what is fed from us to us from outside there, and where things are made more or less in the lab, but not in conjunction with the farm, with the conditions that you have on the land or in the garden, for that matter. So that happened in '95, and I was concerned that things could get away. I didn't know the details. I would listen to these claims, more production, in a way cheaper. So now, in the meantime, we know more. In the meantime, look at corn, look at soybean. It's 90% or so, 80-90% of all the soybean and corn grown in the U.S. are genetically engineered. What does this mean? So as I said before, these corn farms and soy farms, they are on their own. Drive to the countryside in Iowa, in the Midwest, and look at the farms. You still see these old silos where they put the corn in the past, but the animals are gone. So, no connection. You just see, where can I sell it? Send it somewhere, try to get rid of it in Europe, or make maybe ethanol out of it, whatever, just of plastic. We have so much of it, of all the corn and soy. We just do something with it. No consideration. I'm thinking of where have we gotten as a nation? Where have farmers gotten that they don't know thing any longer? How was it in the past? For instance, how would you deal with the weeds? So now today we use glyphosate, we use Roundup Ready crops. Why? Because farmers have no idea anymore how to do weed management. When do you work the land? In the past, everyone knew that. There would be certain times before the crop that you planted, you would make sure that you have a run, that you go over the land, you get rid of the weeds. I mean, there's even some methods, say, for certain crops, you might even, say, flame the surface before the crop comes up, say for carrots or onions that are slow to germinate. This is what we might do. The weeds come, and because the crop is slow, the weeds start coming, and the carrots haven't come through yet. And then we would use a flamer, when you could either just use a little thing in your garden, or a little propane thing, or you have a more sophisticated system with rows of it behind the tractor, and it goes precisely where the seeds are planted. And so it gets rid of the weeds. And when the crop starts coming up, it's clean. And in between, we can cultivate with something, get rid of the weeds. Well, the organic farmers are all doing it. They're a lot smarter. So the organic farmers have learned, again, to deal with the natural environment, just working with it where it's needed. But conventional farming has become, I don't know, I shouldn't say anything bad, but has become lazy, or rather, they've had the wrong advisors. But what you learn in university, you just learn what chemical to use. So farmers haven't learned any longer to deal with the natural environment. And so that meant then, okay, let's just put some Roundup Ready, use a Roundup Ready crop, which is genetic engineered corn, primarily, so that takes care of things. It is amazing to think of the power that Monsanto has. And the reason, though, why they have the power is, first of all, it's very interesting in this country. I'm German, so I grew up with something different, that corporations are the most important for the country. People don't count. People don't count. It's not about the health of the population, and to keep the country healthy, and to have something that promotes the greatest health at the least cost, but rather profits for the corporations. And if you see how the government is going to bet with Monsanto, and how all the positions, say, in agriculture ministry, there are people from Monsanto, well, what do you expect? It's amazing that it could get this way. It's amazing how they could get away with it. So that there's huge power. And looking what Obama was saying in his last campaign, he said, I'm going to be president I will vote. I will make sure that genetically engineered food will be labeled. Ha ha ha. Yeah. So where are we now? No more talk about this, because where's the money coming from for everything? So it is huge, and I think one of our greatest problems that we're facing with, we don't have enough people who will speak up. We don't have enough people who just don't care and risk something to speak up. People in opposition who can do it. The only one at this point, I would say, person of real position who has spoken up is Don Huber, this professor of Purdue, who was sending a letter to the Secretary of Agriculture, Wilczek, and telling him, stop, don't let the genetically engineered alfalfa out. Hold it, hold it. We've seen so many problems, don't do it yet. And what happened? Nothing. I hope that the day will come that Wilczek will stand in court and say, what, how about this? When you received this letter, what did you do? Now, why didn't you wait? How can this be? So where are we? Where are we? This is here in America. Look at the Europeans. They don't do that. They don't work that way. They're very careful. They're testing everything. People there, of course, are also much more outspoken, thank God. They will go on the street, they will pull out the fields, they will burn it, whatever. They will not take this. Yeah, but here it's extremely difficult. Yeah, and so when Don Huber started speaking up, at least there was one person, one scientist of statute who spoke. And he only, he's written a private letter to Secretary Wilczek, and he said, look, I feel this is actually almost a national security issue, because there could be effects later on. There is this organism forming that we found in cattle, in swine, and horse operations, both in the crops, in the field, as well in the animals, that show us that this is a great increase in disease. Hold it. We need to test this first. We need to find out. And it was leaked by somebody. Suddenly he became sort of a celebrity in certain circles. But did you read in the press about this? No. You didn't. It was not written anywhere. You'd had to go to something little, I don't know. Maybe the Europeans would have told you. But you couldn't read it here in the mainstream U.S. press. They are careful. Why did the Bee not support the measure 37? Well, they may still get some nice advertisement coming for them later on. Yeah, no one speaks up. It's hopeless. It's just about hopeless. So I know at some point it will spill over, because the effect is going to be so severe that there's no turning back. And then there has to be a court case. There has to be a court case. But I don't know when it's going to be. But in the meantime, what are we dealing with? Maybe I should go into genetic, maybe let's start with alfalfa. This crop that was going to be deregulated, and where this caution came. Hold it, hold it. Let's look at this crop. This is probably the fourth most important crop in the US. Is the most important feed actually for livestock. Very high protein plant. For a plant really high protein, normally you have that high protein only, you don't quite have it in plants. Exception, the plants that fix nitrogen, legumes. In there you also have the soybean. Soybean had been already taken earlier on, could be used for a lot of things. What is special about these plants in this family? They fix nitrogen from the air. They are capable of fixing nitrogen from the air in conjunction with a bacterium that lives in their roots. Think for a moment, you all know beans, or you all know clovers. You've seen these plants. And think of the form of the clover. So here you have this plant with these three lobes on the leaf. And so you have the feeling, I try to bring pictures to that help. So you see that it's a gesture almost like this. It's not like the grass, which is going out, but rather it's kind of coming in. So it is like a gesture, a welcome gesture. Okay, we can take you. It's almost like pulling in the air, the nitrogen from the air, and sending it down. And it goes down on the roots, and it forms these nodules. And if you pull one of your beans early, before they had any fruit, you see all these beautiful little nodules on there. Once your beans grow, gradually these nodules will disappear. Why? Because the beans need it. Bean, high in protein, takes this nitrogen that was fixed by the air. How is your need for compost when you plant beans, or the like, or other crops in this family? Minimal. Minimal. They don't like to get much nitrogen because they do their own work. As a matter of fact, if you plant beans and you use manure compost that's not very, very, very well aged, you see yellowing of leaves. It's very common, and they don't like it. They don't like it. They do almost do better not with anything but just grown without any fertility. And if anything, only ripe. I use only plant compost on my beans because they do better that way than if I use manure compost. So we do better with giving very little fertility to those plants in the bean family, to the legumes. So you have, say, the annual, the beans, or the soybean, but then you have the perennial in the alfalfa. Alfalfa may grow for 4 years. It takes a little time to get established. When it first grows, actually, you put the seed in and it spreads, it kind of will mat on the ground. And so in the beginning, there will be more space around the little plants, which means there will be weeds. Well, darn, I can't sell my alfalfa here now. However, if I had livestock in the barn, I would say, cool, great. Alfalfa is too strong in itself. I actually need to balance it. Too much of this high protein, especially for my young stock, no good. I should actually have a mix of alfalfa and grass, or weeds. Well, what are weeds? They are actually normally very good plants. They're just not what you want to have in there. However, if I go on the market and show my alfalfa and there's weeds in there, what? You want to sell this to me? And so you see, again, the disconnect, or rather the effect of farming. Instead of having the farm that you grow your alfalfa that you need on the farm for your lifestyle, we buy it. We get it from we get it from Nevada, from wherever, from Northern California. They ship it down here, and look on those farms. Well, you only see alfalfa, whatever. You don't see the livestock any longer. That is a big problem. So we see it's all working together. Okay, so in the very beginning, in the first year, at least for the first cut, there's going to be weeds. I like it. When I went to the last time to a farmer in Woodland to get hay, I said, give me this first here, which had the mix. And then later I'll get the other one. So the second cut already, after the first one, is already much cleaner. And then the third cut, we have about 4 or 5 cuts here in California per year. And by the third or fourth cut, most likely you're going to have only alfalfa. In the second year, it should also be pretty clean. Maybe the first cut a little bit. But alfalfa is not really a crop of concern to farmers because you get a full stand after a while. It's not like crops that take a long, long time to, that are totally open. It fills in all right. And so, well, why do we need that to be genetically engineered? And then you have it for years, which means whatever you put in there will build up. So now let's look at Roundup Ready Roundup first. Actually, Roundup is just a name for a particular chemical, and that is glyphosate. And glyphosate is a herbicide that works not through killing a plant directly, but rather immobilizing certain aspects, growth aspects that are needed in the plant. So, and that works through chelation. That means certain elements will not be available to the plants any longer. Normally, you have everything that's around is available to the plant, and the plant, through bacterial work that surround the plant, will help to take this into the plant's organism and build the body of the plant. The mineral side that's needed from below, if you will. Carbon is all the time above it, that's free, but the minerals that are needed for the plants from below, they normally are available, and through proper management you have enough of them in the ground. So the stuff we've had around us for quite a while. And maybe you remember people said, Roundup is okay. You know, the other stuff is not good, but Roundup is, oh boy, it's very benign. So we've had this for a while. And it was already bad enough, because by now we're accumulating it actually in our bodies. Everyone in Europe, where there's very little genetically engineered crops, people have it in their urine. A city dweller would have at an amount maybe 5 to 20 times the amount of allowed glyphosate that would be allowed in the drinking water. Can you imagine? 5 to 20 times the amount that's allowed in the drinking water is what people have in their urine that comes out all the time. It's been accumulated for decades. So everyone loves Roundup and puts it on there. That's even before genetic engineering. Because there's little of it in Europe. So it's a huge problem. Now, you all know how great Roundup is. Try to get rid of that Bermuda grass. Man. And so you put Roundup on it, gone. So how does Roundup work? It's actually systemic. It means wherever it touches the plant, it works throughout the whole plant. It takes care of it. But at a cost. At a cost. So we've been living with Roundup for a while, and now it's all over. But what does it do? What does it mean, this chelation, and that certain elements are no longer available? That means that everything has become very poor. That certain elements may not be available or are at very, very low levels. Maybe only 20% of what would normally be available. Now let's look at, for instance, at the Roundup Ready alfalfa. Yeah, this great new edition that got released a year ago in February. This Roundup, through its chelation, inhibits, or rather it has become toxic to these nitrogen-fixing bacteria, which means the effect that you had before, maybe fixing 75% of all your need of nitrogen out of the air, rather than buying product and putting it onto the land, is practically null. Just about all the nitrogen fixation has stopped in those crops. That has been already the case for the soybeans before. I mean, would a farmer not be stupid to buy something like this? Just even from this perspective, I kind of wonder, I mean, as farmers, you always have to look at how can you use the least products for the greatest benefit of the farm. You become a total junkie, a lot worse than before. So you have to buy everything, you have to buy extra nitrogen, but that's only one thing. How about the other elements? So you need to buy extra, it doesn't work. So then you put this on, and through the chelation though, through the glyphosate in the ground, there's ever more tying up of nutrients. Magnesium, hardly anything available. Zinc, iron, or any of the, all of the micronutrients, for the most part, they all go down to hardly anything. Okay, well I have to buy extra. All right, buy extra. You put it on, and maybe only 20% of what you put on is available. The rest sits there. It's not exactly good, but it's not available. That is what's happening. Yeah. Our land is filled with this stuff, and it's not available to the plants. Yeah. So can you imagine what it means? So here we have it, not available to the plant, not enough available to the plants. And if the elements go in the plant, well, what would go into the plant? Well, the glyphosate will also end up in the plants. It either is in the soil and remains there for decades, Do you remember DDT and the effect, how long that lasted? We still have a little bit, have to deal with this. This could even be longer. So, do you realize that we have to stop this madness? Because if this continues, the longer it continues, and the more crops are grown this way, the more crops are deregulated to be put into the ground, the worse it's going to be. How's our going to be the national health with all of this? You've probably heard already the increase in allergies, infertility, digestive disorders. All this will increase so much more.
So the crops are sprayed with Roundup. It kills the weeds, but the weeds and stuff gets the Roundup still on them. How does the Roundup react in the human body? Is there any studies on that?
Good. Yes. Well, it reacts everywhere. So it's not just something that's out there in the field, but rather it is taken up by the plant. So the Roundup or the glyphosate is taken up by the plant, and the plant passes it on to the animal. So now the animal eats it, accumulates it in its own body. We eat the meat, we drink the milk, or we eat the crop directly, and so we get it too. That's how it accumulates. And so we have these large amounts, and look at the problems that we have already, the health problems that we have already. How allergies have increased in the last 50 years. This is great in this film. It shows several examples of, say, like from about 2000 or a little before, how suddenly certain diseases problems skyrocketed. And that has to do with this. So it got into us then too. It's not only in the ground, in the soil, in the plants, in the animals, but then also in us now. And you know, if you are very health conscious and you don't do anything stupid, don't ever touch even Roundup at your home, you're in a little bit better position, but we have a lot of it around. So I want you to become aware of it simply to where we are living and to see what an incredible burden we are putting on for our country and for the world, because we're also trying to sell it wherever we can in the world. There's some smart countries that say, no thanks. We rather starve. Even African nations have said, no thanks. Don't give us your aid of genetically engineered crops. We rather don't take anything. We're putting such a great burden on, and we have to live with this. Yeah? And it's not just, I go to the natural food store, you know, and I buy my organic food. Well, we're still with it. And all the people who don't know what we're talking about here, they all have to deal with this. So it's a huge burden.
So GMO is a pretty broad scope of techniques and plants and all that, right? Mm-hmm. Is there a problem with kind of labeling the entire science of GMO as being negative based on some very key, obviously, issues with like Roundup and such? Aren't there other parts of it that are very beneficial to the world and all that? So
okay, good.
Where's the balance?
Okay, very good, very good. Let's look at this for a moment. So let's look at evolution. Evolution has happened for millions of years without us tinkering with it. And it worked fairly well. There's always some problems, of course. Problems always have to be there where there's a regulation of something that's not quite working. And often it has happened through some intervention or other. Some problems arise, and they are part of the times. There was tuberculosis. We don't have to deal with that any longer. There were certain things at certain ages, and then others, and cancer, AIDS. So there's things that come up that have to do with where we live. But all this is basically in the natural order of things. So as soon as we take one part out of its natural place and put it somewhere else, we cannot expect things to work just otherwise normally. It's like when you take, a rabbit to some island, remote island, and suddenly you've got this huge problem. So wherever you do something that has no business in a place and doesn't have the proper response, because we can't respond properly to these man-made products that basically don't exist. So the reason why it's such a big problem with glyphosate, with Roundup, is that it is basically there is no self-regulation. Everything that is created, that has evolved over millennia, keeps itself in balance. And there's one part, another one works against it. And when we now insert something, put something in that has no business there, then basically that response can't be there. And so even though there may be a good idea of, well, couldn't we do something, maybe putting something in grain, or say in rice against yellow fever, I'm just making it up, or something that is a problem somewhere, so we just put something in there and it's all benign, that's all. We should expect some problems. And also, hold on, and also, we have much more, we are thinking right now more about the problems that we have with the crops that are dealt with. And all the crops that are done so far are the biggest ones. So it's cotton, it's a huge one. It's soy, it's corn, those are the most important crops for the country. So there may be some things where it might be okay, but I think we still need general protection. That is, so I think, and people have done this for many years too, that any innovations are possible without doing that step. You can do all kind of things with natural, say like with plant breeding. I'm actually breeding on my farm too. I can do that with other measures. I don't need to resolve to that because of the problems that it would bring. I know that it can't be there, and that is why I started off that way. We have to understand that creation made sense. Creation made utterly sense. And it's not this all things are held in balance. And they may be temporarily out of balance, but if we think that we can do it better than creation, well, just look around right now.
So there's a big problem.
Yeah.
And that's that there's over 6 billion people on Earth, and that's not going to change.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to feed them.
Yes. But
and
the problem...
the population is
Okay.
going to double in 50 years.
Yeah, good.
Depending on what study you
Okay, good.
say.
Now let me come directly back to this. Genetic engineering brings crops down, as a decrease in yields. So that they don't say this, but the yields have gone down.
Okay.
And the health of the plants have gone down. We had much higher cost. So what cost do we have for the nation when we have all these people having allergies and having all these other effects? So it is a good idea, maybe, and I'm not even sure it was a good idea, it was not a marketing ploy. The reality is there's enough food in the world, it's distribution. It's not that we're not growing enough food, it's rather that availability of food. That's the issue at this point. It's not that there's not enough food in the world. But how are we going to degrade? How are we going to degrade? That's the big question.
So there's areas of the world that are very productive,
Mm-hmm.
right? And actually, we just had to go to a study given by a professor at Willamette University
Mm-hmm.
on the Willamette Valley.
Mm-hmm.
And could you take all that's produced in the Willamette Valley, right, and keep it local and feed the population,
Mm-hmm.
right? Local production,
Mm-hmm.
being local, good distribution and all that. It didn't even come close from their study to being able to support population central and located just within the Willamette Valley, which isn't even close to what the Sacramento Valley is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There's parts of the world that, and those are two of the most productive areas in the
Yeah.
world, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how do you feed a population that's not close to one of these extremely productive areas, and yet expect to have some type of nutrition,
Okay, good.
balanced nutrition?
It's a very good question. I think we need to do a lot of research in seeing how to work more efficiently in farming and say how a farm can produce enough to that it doesn't lose actually the value of its land. So how do we make sure that the land will become more valuable rather than less? So what we leave behind, or what's accumulating with the glyphosate in the ground, will be ever less useless. As I was saying, only 20% of some of the applications of fertilizers becomes available for the next crop, which means the farmers will be bankrupt soon, because they can't buy it any longer. They have to buy ever more, and they have ever less effect. So I think that's a reality, but your question is valid. It's only not we can't do it that way. And maybe people think, yes, we have to, because, of course, we have to feed the population, but we have to find ways that are really smart, and we better get the nitrogen for free from the air, instead of putting most of it, having to increase all of this, because the cost is going to go up so much. But you are certainly right. We have to make sure we work very efficiently, and things can be improved. But it is not so that genetic engineering has brought any increase in yields. Actually, quite to the contrary. And it's amazing that it's still around. The farmers, for instance, when they want to grow this crop, they have to sign a contract, say with Monsanto, saying they're not going to do any of the private research. They can't compare. They're not supposed to compare yields before and afterwards to see. They should have jumped off a long time ago. So there's actually, everything is hindering proper development. So that is one important aspect.
Do you know of any genetic engineering of a food crop that has been done for other than a systemic pesticide or to resist herbicide?
Yeah, I think the new ones that were sort of in the pipeline, that were in the making, I think there was something with rice that got loose then and then got stopped. Maybe it was about 10 years ago, or at least 5. That was something more like medicinal. And so that is an idea of using it that way, but it hasn't gotten anywhere yet.
I'm understanding, as I hear you talk, that this is going to become a legal problem at some point in time. I have a distant relative, potato farmer. He took over a property that his father grew potatoes on. He sold the property saying to me, there's not an organic potato left in the land. And I want to hear you say more about this contract of not saying how many and comparing, and why, what happened to all those potato farmers that have perhaps the same feeling, and why is not there a conglomerate of hired farmers that have taken this to the courts?
Yes. So this past year, there were farmers who took it to court, and they said it should never have Monsanto should never have gotten a patent for the BT for the Roundup Ready crops, because it has not proven to be the way how they said it was going to be. That yields are down. It doesn't warrant getting a patent for it because it hasn't brought any improvements. It was only brought, however, in the first instance, this law, actually the suit was put down. It will be repealed, and in there were actually many farmers, many seed growers, because they have the concern if they can't grow proper seeds, it's a problem. And this problem actually is also in the Willamette Valley. There are seed growers on the edge of the valley, and they're losing their crop. I know of one person who's growing. He wants to do beets. Actually, was growing with beets, and since sugar beets were going to be let loose in the Willamette Valley, he's losing business. So the organic farmers who try not to do this, they get penalized by it. And not only can't they sell their stuff because it gets contaminated, but also they have to pay even to Monsanto, like Percy Smither, this canola grower in Manitoba or wherever. They were making him pay because they hid the genetically engineered canola drifted onto his land, or the insect took it over. And so this is huge injustice, and it's only because we've got all this enmeshed. There's not even a law, not even in the judiciary system have people stood up and said, wait a moment, what are we talking about? Because we have to have a system where not everything is mashed up, as it is at this point, that Monsanto has this incredible power because they sit everywhere and they kind of bully that we have independent views. Independent views are possible. At this point, hardly. But it will have to happen over time. So there are some movements against it, but hasn't been strong enough yet. It certainly hasn't been enough mainstream yet. So the organic farmers, even though they're an important aspect of our economy, it's not counted yet. It has to be much bigger to really counter, to be strong enough, powerful enough.
And I believe the Rice Growers Association did band together, and they stopped the rice that would have, I think it was vitamin A, because it would have destroyed their export markets. Japan and all those people in Europe, they don't want our genetically engineered food. So if the potato growers can band together like that and prove that the markets, it's all money. So.
But there's no maybe there are genetically engineered potatoes. I'm not.
Well, this was his farm that he sold, so
Yes.
That's the only person I know about that. I'd like to know your opinion of this ballot measure, and do you think that it has enough grit to pass? And is it going to be something, as we've seen in the past, with the way California goes, the way the nation goes, is it that strong, or does it need to be reinforced with years?
I wished it were, but just seeing the misinformation, how it goes out, and how there's no response. There's been very little response to these articles. Say, there's this one fellow who sits on the board of, the Fruit Growers Association or whatever. There was no proper response in the paper. Or the paper didn't print it, I don't know. But there's too little coming out. There's too little speaking out. And there's too little public figures. People saying, wait a moment, this doesn't go. So I feel it will be, once the full load of misinformation comes out, it will be hard. And people say, well, it's like this last issue a year ago, or what was it? Was it about tobacco or something? And it was said, oh, it serves people out of state, it didn't get passed. It was something very straightforward and clear. It was so stupid. You think, how are people not doing any thinking or any looking? That passed. Or rather, it was not because it didn't pass. I don't know which way the measure came, but it was just too strong. The countering, just people say, I suppose it shouldn't be shown. So, and there's too many people who say, well, if it gets too expensive, if my food bill will increase by $400 a year, I can't afford that. Or, all those things.
Fear tactics.
So we'll see. So I feel we have to be ready that it could possibly not work. We have to do all we can to get it passed. But at the same time, we have to see to what's next. Because this issue is so much bigger. You're right. California should lead, of course, I hope. But what are we going to do if it doesn't? What's the next step? And just even to become aware of what's this madness that's happening is the first step. And it has to be shared with others. I mean, I want you all to check out, just Google Don Huber and see what you can find. There's some good articles, say, there was one by Dr. Macola, two interviews, mostly the interviews, and he'll tell you everything sort of on the research, very, if you will, dry. He's not emotional, not passionate, but rather just a scientist. And he knows, he's always been looking for ways how to make life better in the scientific, through proper science. But he's seen it, but now he's more in the open and has become an authority in telling people what's going on. So, yes.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah.
cover the seeds before
Yes.
one goes too far? Like,
Yes, I will leave you a chance first, maybe, if you want to.
So I kind of asked before, what percentage of GMO, genetically engineered, is the glyphosate versus others?
Okay, good.
And the reason I ask that is, you know, we passed a bill for genetic engineering that provides billions of dollars to genetic engineering. So there almost is this acceptance of genetic engineering in the population because it does provide good health benefits. So they're kind of being linked, genetic engineering of plants versus human genetic engineering and scientific progress. So is there this misinformation merely because of the way all this is labeled? If it is specifically focused on Roundup, why not say it's specifically focused on Roundup?
Okay.
And that is the core main issue and problem.
Yeah. It is, Roundup is actually the main one. It's probably maybe 75% or so. And the other, or maybe even 80, something in that neighborhood, 20% would be BT, this Bacillus thuringiensis that will kill worms, a different kind of insects. It's roughly in that percentage. And so in the case of the BT crops, this gene from the bacillus that will be a toxin to any worm, kind of particular caterpillars and so on, is inserted so that the whole plant has become toxic. And maybe you remember hearing the news 10 years ago that the monarch butterfly would be dying if it fed on corn that has been genetically engineered, that has had this BT toxin in it. So that compare is still smaller, even though it's also a huge problem, because if you think of something, the whole plant becomes toxic. What happens if it gets in us? All this moves. But the biggest problem is Roundup. And one problem is that scientists will have to get permission from Monsanto to publish any of their works. So they cannot bring something, publish it, without them saying yay. And they don't say yay. So a lot of the research that is happening here, you hardly get support for it, but a lot of it just doesn't come out. So that's basically suppressed directly.
Which in the internet age is pretty amazing.
It is amazing, but then again, I said...
This is suppressed, and
Yeah, I
you
know.
can't really... I mean, there aren't blogs, there aren't wikis, there aren't websites, there aren't all this against
Okay,
it.
good. Let's look just in this age. Check out Proposition 37. What comes up? Huge. No! And then you hardly see yes. Because where's the money coming from? So you see it. There's manipulation. There's a lot of manipulation because the power. However, you find Dr. Huber, but you have to know that he is in there. And once you know, you find it. And then you look from there and says, check there and so on. You can find it, but you have to look much more. So it's harder to find. So it's more work. Yes, back there.
If you go to Ricola.com
Yes.
and find the search box and put in Dr. Huber, he did do those interviews, they're great interviews.
Yes.
That probably might be a faster way.
Very good information. Right. Way back there.
Was it this summer there was the study with Stanford and organic foods didn't have more nutrients than the can you speak to that?
Oh, yes.
No.
So, do you believe it? Do you really buy that? I don't buy it at all. So it's a question sometimes how you ask the question. And if you ask it the wrong way, maybe that will come out. So if you think of what you do when you do organic or biodynamic farming, what you do for the earth, are you making it any better or worse? Isn't that worth something in the first place? Versus, say, primarily these big crops with the genetic engineering and what it does to the soil, what accumulates. I mean, we must be dreaming if we don't see that. How long did the studies last? I think they lasted a few years, but what did they look for? Yeah, I don't buy it at all. Jeanette?
Steiner was not happy with the state of wheat
in his day, and he said it needed to be changed, I guess by hybridizing it. Did that happen?
Yeah, keep in mind.
Huh?
Yes. So the wheat already in the 1920s was problematic, and I think since that it has been even much more bred towards high gluten. And Rudolf Steiner suggested to the farmers they should look into working with wild grasses and maybe crossing wild grasses with wheat or so. And this has been done to some extent in the early years of the last century. Was more work happened with it. Not enough has happened in this direction. So some people grew or say like rye. I've seen a rye that grew that tall and had ears about that long. So you get a lot of biomass too, which can be important, but there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. Interesting too, there's a researcher in Pullman, Washington, who works with perennial grains. Because the problem that we have with annual grains or annual wheat, is that you have a lot of soil erosion because the soil gets moved all the time. So there's some research into seeing how perennial wheat might fare. It's interesting. I think it's a worthwhile development to pursue that. Okay.
And
Yeah.
of course, we all know that hybridization, which has gone on for thousands of years, and is
Yeah,
very
it depends
different
on which way.
It's very different than genetic engineering. Hybridization is very different than genetic engineering. In genetic engineering, you're not taking two species that are related at all. You're crossing species barriers, plants and animals. You're forcing in bacteria in the lab only about one unit survives. You grow that out. Genetic engineering, people will ask you that if you're out, is very different than hybridization.
Yeah, and hybridization can also just mean in the first place that you put two different things together. It could mean just crossing. When I hear hybrid itself, it's kind of what you buy in the stores where you can't save seed, or you have to take at least 10 years until you've got something useful again. But basically crossing, just open pollinated.
So you mentioned fluoride briefly. Do you know if there's any comparisons between fluoridated water on crops versus non-fluoridated water on crops?
I don't know. I don't think that there's too much used on crops because it's only used in cities.
I use it in my backyard.
Yeah, well, you have to because you live in the city and you don't have an alternative. And it's very difficult to get fluoride out of, to filter it out as far as I know. And that's why if they should fluoride feral water, I would have to get it filtered. I would have to drill, I'd have to pump it up because I couldn't use it any longer. I know the chlorine for a great deal dissipates, but the fluoride you can't get out. All right, so Jeannie had some questions about seeds, so can you maybe say more?
Well, if I go into the store and buy a packet of seeds, how do I know if those are hybridized, organic,
Okay.
blah, blah, blah?
Okay, good. So the majority, if you go to any, if you go to a hardware store, chances are, unless you're in Nevada City or Davis or somewhere, sort of a little bit more fancy places, there you would find more likely organic seeds. But normally in the regular stores, for the very most part, it's all conventionally grown first. And so unless it says organically grown, we have to say it. If it's organic, it would say it on the pack already. And then, and if it says this hybrid, or you see the name of the variety and then an F1 behind it, which means it's the first Fili one, which means the first son or daughter from the cross, which means it's a hybrid. And that's how you would know that it's been hybridized. And I would urge you to look for open pollinated seeds. We need to make sure that these seeds remain available. And whenever you choose a hybrid, we say, okay, I support you, and let's forget about the other ones. So it's very good to look for open pollinated seed, that it does not say after they're somewhere hybrid. Normally, if the seed is hybrid, it would say somewhere on the package.
Would you have to
And
go on the internet to find that?
Where do we go?
No, you just even, okay. There's some good, for instance, high mowing seed. Yeah, high mowing seed is an organic seed company there in Vermont.
Okay.
But they have seeds, they carry seeds. Actually, they're grown all over. Seeds of Change is another strictly organic seed company. They use hybrids, though. I don't approve it. Organic hybrids. Turtle Tree Seed is a biodynamic seed company. So if you Google any of those three, you have already a good number of organically grown or biodynamically grown seeds. So that's, yeah.
How about you want to, I want to take my best tomato and get the seeds out of it. What's the best way to separate dried as seeds so I can use it?
All right. So your best tomato, first of all, you want to find out if it was open pollinated. If it was hybrid, it's already, you don't know what you're getting, even though tomato is the most easy one that you could even take a hybrid and eventually dehybridize. I'm doing sun gold cherry. I have been dehybridizing it, but it's been taking more than 10 years. So you can do that, but it's work. So, but otherwise, when you have a tomato that you love, you can try it too. So you take the tomato, or a few tomatoes, and you don't do it where it's neighboring to another variety, because there might be some crossing. Tomatoes are self-pollinated. That means they should not cross with another plant unless somehow there's some insect that hop from one to the other. But the insects are not drawn, the bees are not drawn to the flowers normally, unless it's potato leaf variety. But anyway, tomatoes are fairly easy. So you squeeze out a few fruit and then put it in a little jar, narrow jar, stir it a few times a day, and you'll see after a day or maybe two to get frothy. And it may start smelling slightly. So you do it with the juice. And now you put it in a sieve, kind of just go over it and make sure that the pulp comes out in both directions, from above, from below. And then maybe you put it in a bowl, and then gently you add water to it, and it brings turbulence, and chaff comes to the top. You get this off, and you repeat this process until you've only got the seeds left in there. You put it on some cardboard, you write the variety name on there, and I put it somewhere high in the room, not outside in the sun. Maybe put ceiling fan on, and then after about 2 weeks it's ready to be stored. Don't put it in plastic, just in paper. And so there you've got your tomatoes. You get started, simple, very simple.
And how do you store it?
So I store it just in paper bags, and out of the light, put it somewhere in a darker place.
You wouldn't put it in a glass jar with a lid?
Don't need to. You could, but if you do, you have to make sure it's really dry. If you seal it and there's any moisture in it, it's going to be gone, unless you put in, some desiccant, sort of silica gel or so that's active.
And how long would you store it before you have to use it?
At least 5 years, at least. Maybe 10 years. Depends on how healthy they were grown. The more healthy you grow, the longer the seeds last.
I think aren't all seeds hybrids because you take it's pollinated from one flower to another flower?
Okay.
So like if I have a plum tree,
Yeah.
all those are
All right.
hybrid plums, right?
Well, actually, the plums, so the reason why we get this funny stuff is it's the rootstock that develops. So if you have a plum and you throw them on the ground and they came from rootstock, I think you see all these wild
Let's just pull plums as you've got a lot of flowers. Or like tomatoes or squash. If I take a squash seed,
Yeah.
I see my bees go into the squash seed, so
Right, yes.
I'm going to get a hybrid squash next year, right?
Okay. If you grow just one variety of squash, one of a species of squash, say one zucchini, and no other zucchini, you only got a butternut, which is a different species. And that's all you have, and you don't have neighbors around you, not in community garden, where everyone has something, and the bees really fly to everything. That should be okay. That should be okay. So it's only, and you have to have enough plants. So I urge you, if you're really interested in seed growing, December 1st, I have a workshop at Rudolf Steiner College. check it out. I didn't bring the flyer. I should have done this. Rather the brochure. steinercollege.edu. And there's a whole day workshop just on seed saving. It's great. Because normally people get started and it's like a bug that you contract and you can't get rid of any longer. You become a nut.
Can you come there and buy seeds?
You can you can also buy seeds that I grow in Rudolph Steiner College bookstore at 9200 Fair Oaks Boulevard in Fair Oaks. Or you can get them through Turtle Tree Seed, and you check then seeds. They show you in this catalog, they show you actually the growers, and it says then grown by RG, that's Raphael Gardner at Rudolph Steiner College. So if you want to have locally grown good seeds, highest quality, very healthy, you could get them there. So, what other question? Ginny, have I answered all of your questions?
Yeah, I think so.
Do you get tours of your farm?
Yes, I do give tours, so you either just come there yourself and walk around. If a group comes, I can arrange that too.
Can people just drop in or what?
Oh, absolutely. People
Just
can
drop
go
in,
there.
walk around, and
Yes.
you sell food on certain days?
No. I don't sell food.
Not
The
you,
garden,
but the...
it's all community-supported agriculture, CSA, so people basically buy a year's supply or they sign on and they get all that we're growing. So we have so many shares that we can manage to have that everyone will get enough food, but we don't sell sort of just drop in.